Okay, so I've seen this happen where English was not the predominant language and the student was not that verbal and needed to be the reporter, as in speaking. The teacher knew this and strategically grouped them with a person who was bilingual. So the person who was the reporter spoke in Vietnamese, and the other person who was bilingual also spoke and translated it into English. Took a little longer, it worked. It's also okay to take notes in a language other than English because, like, I remember when I was taking classes in Spanish, I couldn't write in Spanish as fast as I could speak. So I would always take notes in English, and then when I had to say something in class, I would look at my English notes and make reference to it in Spanish. So there are kids that will be able to do either or. Just think outside the box. Knowing your students, that's the same message from this morning as well. What are their native languages? What are their school attendance patterns? How much exposure do they have to academic language in school and out of school? How long has the student been in school in the U.S.? Oftentimes we think, well, not that long, when in all reality, oh gosh, they've been here their whole lives. And how proficient is the student in reading and writing in their native language, or L1 as we call it? This makes a difference because, and I'll show you in a minute, the brain connects those two things. So here are some factors, as I'm sure none of these look surprising, that affect second language acquisition and things that we have to think about for our lesson plans. Motivation, so we got to plan motivating lessons. First language development and literacy. We'll talk about that in a second. What the heck is language distance? What are your ideas? Throw them out there. I promise that I have heard all kinds of stuff. Debbie, ding, 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 ding. Yes. In what sense? Keep going. Root words possibly. What else? Yes. Possibly. The writing system. The characters. Is it a language that involves individual sounds attached to letters? Or is it a writing system that involves characters that represent a group of sounds or possibly a whole word? In what direction does writing occur? So when we write in English, we're writing from, correct. Some languages write, yes. Some go in columns. Yes. So the further away from English, in terms of writing structure and alphabetic systems, the further away from English they go, doesn't necessarily mean that the students aren't capable of learning to read and write in English. It just means that they have a little bit more distance to travel to get there. So it'd be like you learning how to write in Spanish versus how to write in Arabic. Arabic is a little further away, so it might take you a little longer to get that system. But it's coming. Access to the language. How much exposure, like we talked about, are kids getting? Home situation. And I don't mean home situation in terms of language, but I mean home situation in terms of turmoil. Responsibility. A lot of kids whose families have personally owned businesses, much like the business Debbie's father described, or she described that her father created. You know, they come home from school and they might have to go work at the grocery store, or their parents are working at the restaurant, so they're home raising their brothers and sisters. Not a lot of time, or working at the restaurant, or raising their brothers and sisters in the back room at the restaurant. So, not a lot of time for public library things. Age. One big myth I'm going to debunk today. Talk to me about language learning and age. No, more so like when you start to learn a language. Little kids learning language versus adults. Yes. There's so much research that supports the notion that that's really not always the case. Because when you're older, you have more like wisdom in theory. You have more ideas. You've been exposed to more concepts. And so when you learn vocabulary, you have something to hook a word to. Your vocabulary as an adult is broader than your vocabulary as a child. The other piece is with kids, it seems like they're learning language a lot easier because they approach the learning process very much like they play. Not so worried about peer pressure. Come on, I'll be nice to you. You're my friend. I'll teach you these words. I'll show you how to do this. And not being intimidated by the fact that they can't communicate. They don't care. They're kids, little kids. You get to middle school and this wow thing called puberty happens. And all of a sudden, what other people think of me really matters. And I don't know, it's like overnight. It's like a switch. The puberty switch is on. And kids don't like to feel dumb in front of their peers in middle and high school. And sometimes they misbehave because they don't know an answer and they can't say it, and so I'll just act like a clown. So I can have the energy be focused on my behavior rather than the fact that I don't really know who the 13th president of the US was. So all of that comes into play with age. Personality. Knuckleheads exist worldwide. Good kids exist worldwide. Well-behaved people exist worldwide. Peers and role models. Really important. If we want students to learn academic language, we need to encourage them to practice academic language. So putting a kid in the easy class because they're not ready for the harder class isn't always the answer. Some of the most, I know you're going to go, oh my gosh, she is so off base with this, but some of the most profound learning experiences have been when you take a non-English speaker and you put them in an honors level class. Why? To start out with, rather than putting them in a class, the biology class that's a graduation requirement with the group that's taking biology for maybe the second time or third time. The dialogue in that classroom is different. Not that there isn't a place for that class, they need it. They need the credit to graduate. Yes, absolutely. And all of a sudden the other kids are like, come on, I'll show you how to do this. This is where you come in. Of all of these other things, there is one piece and only one piece where you really have 100% of an impact, and that's here. All that other stuff you have to be mindful about, their culture, we've talked about, access to the curriculum, we've talked about, all of these things. You have to be mindful of that, but your quality of instruction, because of your lesson plans and the way you approach lesson design and delivery, is crucial. So knowing that, and you have this big impact, we have to talk about how do we ensure that we think about all this stuff and make lessons as meaningful as possible for language acquisition. Anybody talk about the iceberg theory before? The horrifically politically incorrect example is the Titanic. So we have on top of the water the basic interpersonal communication skills, social language, what we hear on the playground, what we see at the movie theater, what we hear on the bus. And then we have all this academic language, cognitive academic language proficiency that's hidden under the water. And when the boat doesn't see this or doesn't pay attention to this, what happened to the unsinkable ship? It sank. So the social language is important, and honestly, it kind of comes naturally. You don't have to worry about the kids not being socially communicative with each other, because they are, and they will be to great depths. Focusing on making sure that everybody is exposed to academic language is the key piece with your lesson plans. Where native language comes into play, and I'm sorry you can't really see this well, this diagram, this is labeled L1, native language. So you got social language, academic in their native language. Reading and writing are under here. On the second language side, same thing, social language, academic language. When kids have strong reading and writing skills in their native language, the brain communicates and they learn to read and write in English at a much faster pace because they're cognitively practicing that already. It's not to say that if they don't have this in their native language that they can have that. It's just a different path. So when you hear a kid speaking Spanish or Vietnamese fluently, you can't always assume that they can also read and write in that language. And when you make your lesson plans and you're thinking about structure and you're thinking about cooperative learning activities and strategically grouping kids, you got to know where kids are under the water to try and help pair them accordingly. And the other real possibility is just because someone sounds fluent in English doesn't mean that they have strong reading and writing skills. So maybe they need to be paired with someone who might speak with an accent but has really strong reading and writing skills. The ESL teacher at Garinger, Maria Lee, she is Korean. She has an accent when she speaks. Her reading and writing skills in English are phenomenal. Like super strong. But if I only gauged my pairing with her based on the verbal piece, I would say, well, her English isn't that strong, maybe, because her pronunciation and fluency are completely different. Completely different. So keep that in mind. Okay. As we move toward analyzing our own lesson plans, I want you to start thinking about this. When you plan a lesson, are you thinking about it as interesting from your perspective? I really like this, so I want to talk about it. Or is it interesting from the kid's perspective? And I've had to teach some lessons using activities that I could not stand because it wasn't interesting to me, but the kids love it. You know, so think about that. Think about the use of supplementary materials, but supplementary materials that are diverse in nature. So not all the pictures look the same. Maybe the pictures of things look like the kids look, or what they want to see, when at all possible, because sometimes it's not appropriate. Making sure that there are lots of visual supports, lots of hands-on ways for kids to interact, even in high school. Even probably more so in high school. And that information is chunked into small pieces. Have I mentioned peer interaction and how important that is? With structure. Say it, write it, show it. So when I say the word sum, I'm talking about a math lesson. If I just say sum and I don't write it, there will be students who are sitting there thinking, which sum is she talking about? Really important to clarify things in writing, even when you're saying them very clearly. Posting the instructions, having patience, thinking about the language of your content, the vocabulary that goes along with your content, plus some other stuff like transitional words, processing terms. We're really going to look at those tiers of vocabulary on Monday. Okay, before we break and start to analyze our own lesson plans, I love pigs, can you tell? It's the common theme. Just turn to someone near you. It doesn't have to be the person sitting next to you. It could be someone behind you or in front of you. And say something, mention something that you learned today, even if it's minuscule, about second language acquisition.